It was somewhere before sunrise. No one can agree on the minute. Some swear they heard engines long before they saw the dust. Others remember the first flicker on a thermal feed, a bright ring around a turret cupola. Everyone agrees on what followed in the open fields east of Donetsk. A column built to break a line drove straight into a net that had been waiting all night. In the dark, the ground had already changed hands in ways no map shows. Surveillance birds stitched the countryside into a living mosaic. Roads, hedgerows, culverts, heat signatures breathing in grayscale. Engineers moved under red lamps, laying quiet geometry where tracks always converge. Artillery crews preset arcs and angles. Anti-tank teams tucked into places that didn't look like positions at all. The line that mattered wasn't drawn on paper. It was drawn in patience. 6:03 a.m. A Hummingbird dropped from a shallow angle and disappeared into the silhouette of the lead T-90M. The picture skipped a frame. Then the flash came, the kind you feel in your chest more than your ears, and the turret went still. Flames ran along cables and paint and into spaces that were never meant to burn. On a net somewhere, a voice said very softly, "Splash." 6:18 a.m. The second tank edged forward to close the gap. The earth lifted under its left track like a held breath, then exhaled steel. Dirt became dust, became smoke. An APC tried to reverse out of the tightening corridor and found the same invisible teeth. The column bunched into the one shape you never want to see on a battlefield. Predictable. 6:24 a.m. Pre-planned fire began to walk across the grid in disciplined steps. Burst, adjust, burst. Corrections arriving in real time from the glass eyes above. Javelin and NLAW teams watched the gaps the artillery missed. There weren't many. The air took on that charged stillness that says nothing here is accidental. Sensor to shooter felt less like a chain and more like a reflex. The radios changed tone. Clipped words turned to fragments. Fragments dissolved into breath. In the weeds, a spotter whispered numbers that meant everything to a crew crouched over a fire control display a mile away. The idea wasn't to be faster than the enemy. It was to be earlier, to already be there when they arrived. 6:37 a.m. The counterstroke moved. Bradleys from the 47th Mechanized Brigade rolled from cover and went to work. They didn't charge, they cut. Angles were carved, trench lines raked, lighter armor punched before it could harden. The line didn't shatter, it unraveled. A tank alone is a fortress. A column under glass becomes a list of problems to be solved. Routes that look straight on maps are never straight from the sky. Every escape lane that looked clean from ground level ended under a quiet orbit. Shelters turned into aim points. The ground itself felt partisan. And then, the moment that never shows on maps, a single soldier set his rifle down and lifted his hands. Then another. Then a few more. That's what morale looks like when steel burns in front of you. Not loud, just final. 8:16 a.m. Air power arrived late. Glide bombs lumbered in from high and far, trying to tear open a path for a second push. Attack helicopters slid along the tree line, expecting to bully a corridor clear. The sky answered from the ground. Portable air defense teams locked tones and did what training had promised. One helicopter broke off before the tone hardened. Another trailed smoke and vanished into cloud. The air didn't open the door, it closed it. The second wave rolled anyway. Fresh BMPs and tanks believed the path had been cleared. It hadn't. Mines woke in the ruts the first column had left behind. FPV drones fell out of a pale sun and found engine decks and open hatches like they'd been taught the terrain for months. Because they had. Artillery pivoted again, precise and impatient. The field began to smell of torn metal, hot rubber, and soil turned over by violence. The wedge on the right tried to force the old equation, speed, shock, pressure, into a new world that didn't accept it. It met a different equation, eyes everywhere, answers arriving faster than questions. The wedge dulled, split, and bled out into lanes already measured for it. Ukraine didn't chase. They waited, and then they struck. Method over heroics. Fewer risks, fewer losses, more certainty. By afternoon, the place looked like a diagram of what not to do. A recovery vehicle idled at the edge of it all, considering a husk it might or might not be able to pull. It paused, thought better of the angle, and turned away. Dusk taught its own vocabulary. Columns of smoke where the roads used to be, the metallic breath of hot armor cooling, crows circling low over places that had been loud all day. People argue about numbers. Some say a handful of T-90Ms lost in those hours. Others say dozens across the sector that week. The bigger tallies would harden later, with drones claimed responsible for much of what didn't come home. But statistics don't capture the sound a crew hears when the headset goes quiet. Night didn't end the story, it changed the tempo. The next morning arrived with a new idea on Russia's side. Speed. 6:13 a.m. Next day. Quad bikes and off-road motorcycles began threading the ravines. Riders hunched over handlebars, engines kept just below a roar. The theory was simple. Run faster than the trap can close. Skip the heavy armor's fate, dodge the mines, outpace the eyes. They hugged creeks and hedgerows, trusting angles that hadn't been tested in daylight. Speed has a sound that makes you believe in it. That belief is part of the tactic. The sky had been there first. Recon birds watched dust plumes draw lines no map had printed. Targets marked themselves. A finger traced paths on a tablet and tapped. Once, twice, again. Explosions began landing where speed had seemed safest. On straightaways, at the bends, beside old stone walls whose names are remembered only by the ground. Some riders ditched bikes mid-roll and dove for shallow ditches, culverts, broken houses that had survived other wars by accident. The drones followed. They weren't angry, they were meticulous. Precision doesn't care if a vehicle rides on treads or tires. A small cluster broke left, engines high, spitting dirt. A drone skimmed a crest and lost them for a heartbeat, then found them again where the land flattened into a ribbon of grass. Another didn't need to search. It needed only a confirmation. A lone rider slid behind a stack of rusted rails and tried to dissolve into geometry and shadow. The camera that found him didn't blink. A pause, a drop, a bloom of heat, then stillness. War teaches shortcuts. The sky learns them too. When the dust settled, the fast plan didn't feel fast anymore. Frames lay twisted in the grass. Helmets rolled to a stop where no one meant to leave them. The ravines went quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked without knowing why. Later, analysts would call it proof that cheap eyes and clever hands can bend the arc of a battle more than heavy steel can. They would talk about layered defenses and cost curves, about doctrine that refuses to evolve and doctrine that already has. They would point to drones, mines, missiles, pre-registered artillery, mobile reserves, a web that punishes the old way of war. They'd argue over whose numbers are right. The shape of the lesson would not change. What people remember depends on where they stood. A gunner remembers a sight picture steadying and then vanishing in light. A drone operator remembers a target box drifting a fraction and locking. An infantryman remembers the ground he trusted going soft under his boots. A commander remembers the map and how politely it lied. A column came to break a line. It found a net instead. So the question hangs where the smoke used to be, light as thread and heavy as verdict. Can heavy tanks adapt to a battlefield that sees everything and answers faster than they can move? Can armor live where the air itself is hostile, where mines, missiles, and drones conspire with patient artillery and precise counterstrokes? Or is the age of armor already giving way to something lighter, cheaper, smarter? A world where decisive weight is measured not in tons, but in seconds. If this is just one chapter in a longer war of adaptation, the next test won't look like the last. Keep watching. The next answer will arrive before anyone can agree on the time.